It's Saturday morning in Italy, and you're listening to the Magic Towns Italy podcast. Let's dive into this week's stories.
Welcome to Magic Towns Italy, the podcast hosted by Miles and Alessia. In this episode, we focus on cultural regional differences across Italy. Okay, so picture this. You're in southern Italy. You're running late, desperately trying to catch a ferry. Traffic has just dissolved. You think, great, I'm making good time. And then nothing. Everything just stopped. The whole street is blocked. Turns out it's a religious procession. So you're properly panicking now, right? You manage to wave down a police officer. You explain you're going to miss the ferry. They don't just wave you on or shrug. No, they give you a full-on, sirens blazing police escort weaving through all these tiny back streets. You get to the port literally as the ferry ramp is going up.
Wow, that's incredible.
Right. And as you're thanking them, completely flustered, one of the officers just smiles and says, "Let it not be said Italians are unkind."
That is, well, it's such an Italian story in so many ways, but, depending on where exactly in Italy that happened, the whole scenario might have played out quite differently.
That's exactly it. That's what we're digging into today because so many of us have this single image of Italy, right? La Dolce Vita, the beautiful scenery, the piazza life.
And that image is not wrong. It definitely exists.
It absolutely does. But the actual day-to-day experience, the rhythm of life, how people interact, how you even get basic things done, that could feel worlds apart depending on whether you're in Milan versus Naples or Florence versus Palermo.
It's more like a mosaic, isn't it?
Yeah,
Loads of different pieces making up the whole picture. And look, for anyone listening who's ever dreamt of living in Italy, maybe you're thinking about retiring somewhere quiet, doing the remote work thing from a city, or even raising kids there. Understanding these regional nuances is not just interesting trivia, it is fundamental. It's about finding the place where you will genuinely feel like you fit, your home.
absolutely. We want to get past the stereotypes and really unpack what daily life looks like in different Italian regions.
And we're trying to bring a slightly different approach to it. We've actually developed a framework using data and observations to compare regions on the things that really matter day to day for someone moving there.
Okay, a data-informed framework. I like the sound of that. So it's not just gut feelings or anecdotes.
Well, anecdotes are great. They tell you so much. But we wanted to add another layer. So we looked at a whole range of information: official statistics, digital data, academic work, community insights, and used it to score Italy's regions from 1 to 10 across 7 key dimensions.
7 dimensions. What aspects of life did you focus on?
So we looked at one, punctuality and institutional trust. Basically, do things run on time? Yeah, and people trust the systems. Two, rule adherence. How closely are rules followed? Think traffic, queues, things like that. Three, daily rhythm. Is it an early start, early finish kind of place, or does everything happen later?
The timing of life. Got it.
Four, noise and street life. Is it generally quiet and private, or is life lived more out loud in the open?
Right? The vibe of the place.
Five, individualism versus family orientation, big one. Is the focus more on personal independence, or is everything deeply connected to family and community?
Crucial difference. 6, language accessibility. How easy is it realistically to manage with limited Italian at the start? 7, food formality. Now, food is important everywhere in Italy, obviously, but this is about how rigid the customs are, meal times, specific recipes, that kind of thing.
Punctuality, rules, rhythm, noise, family, language, food. Wow, that really does cover the texture of daily life when you land somewhere new. But how on earth do you put a number on something like family orientation or rule adherence? Some of that feels so cultural. It definitely wasn't straightforward. It meant looking beyond just, say, census data. We had to get creative. We pulled from national statistics offices like ISTAT and Eurostat, but also digital info.
Things like analyzing Google Maps business hours to understand daily rhythms, or using OpenStreetMap data to get a sense of foot traffic and street activity. We looked at quality of life surveys done within Italy, academic research on things like social trust and civic behavior,
Okay, so pulling from lots of different angles.
and also, importantly, incorporating observations and discussions from expatriate groups and online communities, people sharing their lived experiences. Where we couldn't get a direct number, we used proxies.
Give me an example.
For rule adherence, we looked at things like regional data on traffic violations. For noise and street life, we analyzed patterns of activity late at night. For language accessibility, we even looked at things like English proficiency scores in schools as one indicator.
That's clever. Using related data points to hint at the bigger picture.
And it's really important to stress these scores are all relative within Italy. A region scoring an 8 on punctuality is not being compared to, say, Germany. It means it is significantly more punctual than other parts of Italy.
It's an internal comparison.
Yeah, and look, some scores, especially for the really deep cultural stuff like family orientation, we obviously have a bit less numerical certainty around compared with, say, traffic data. But even there, the patterns that emerge across regions are really quite striking.
Okay, so lay it on us. When you applied this framework, what were the big headline patterns that jumped out?
What's really fascinating is how clearly that traditional north center south division shows up in the data. It's not just a cliche. There are genuinely distinct clusters of characteristics across these big macro regions, even though, of course, every single region has its own unique flavor too.
The classic north-south split. Let's start there. What's the main difference when it comes to that first dimension? Time and trust.
The North aligns more closely with what many people outside Italy might think of as a standard Western approach. Punctuality tends to be higher. Trust in institutions, government, businesses also scores higher, talking maybe 7s or 8s out of 10 in places like Lombardy or Piedmont.
More predictable.
Yeah, bureaucracy tends to be, let's say, more straightforward and more predictable. Things generally run closer to schedule.
And then the south. Big contrast.
Definitely. Down south, think Campania, Sicily. Those scores for punctuality and trust drop quite a bit, maybe down to 3s or 4s. The whole pace of life is slower. There's generally lower trust in formal systems, and the idea of a strict deadline can be, well, more flexible.
Ah, the famous concept of domani.
Exactly, tomorrow. Which might mean tomorrow or might mean eventually. And it's not just about officialdom. There was even a study we saw referenced that touched on social trust. People in Cuneo, up in Piedmont, were apparently more willing to trust a stranger with borrowed money than people down in Ragusa, Sicily, about 50% versus 35%.
Wow, that's a tangible difference in everyday trust. How does that connect to the daily rhythm? When people eat, when things open and close?
Maps pretty closely. The North generally operates on an earlier schedule. Lunch might be around noon, maybe 12:30. Dinner often starts around 7:30 or 8 p.m. Lombardy, being a big business center, is one of the earliest. As you travel south, that whole daily schedule shifts later. Lunch might push towards 1, even 2 p.m. Dinner rarely begins before 8:30 p.m., often 9 or even later, particularly in summer or in places like Sicily.
Does that mean longer afternoon breaks too? The riposo?
Often, yes. That later rhythm frequently goes hand in hand with a longer break in the middle of the day, especially in smaller towns or more traditional areas. And it definitely means that street life, the buzz of the town, stays active much later into the evening in the south compared to the north. Now, what about rules? Going back to that police escort story, was that just a one-off, or does it reflect something about rule adherence?
Well, our findings on rule adherence seem to align with that kind of flexibility, especially in the south. Northern regions like Lombardy again or Veneto score higher here, maybe 7s or 8s. You tend to see more orderly queues. Drivers are generally more likely to stop properly at red lights. There's just a stronger baseline expectation of following the set procedures.
And the south?
Scores are lower, maybe in the 3 to 5 range. Now, this isn't about saying people are lawless. That's not it at all. It's more about a cultural leaning towards being flexible, maybe using personal connections or a bit of creative thinking to navigate around the formal rules sometimes. It's about achieving the outcome, perhaps less rigidly sticking to the process.
So maybe a different emphasis, more on relationships or practical solutions than the absolute letter of the law.
That's a good way to put it. And you see tangible impacts. We looked at examples like regional waste recycling rates. Some northern regions, like Veneto, had rates that were up there with or even better than places like Denmark, known for being super orderly. Whereas southern regions generally lagged quite far behind.
This could mean facing quite predictable, maybe sometimes inflexible bureaucracy up north,
Right.
versus maybe needing more patience or finding a local contact to help you navigate things down south.
That's often the experience, yes. It's a really significant difference in how you get things done day to day.
Feels huge. Okay. How does this connect to noise and street life? You mentioned the South being later. Is it louder too?
It's a fascinating relationship, almost an inverse one to formality. The more formal, rule oriented North tends to be quieter overall. Piedmont, for example, scored around a 5 out of 10 for noise and street life. Life tends to be lived more behind closed doors and private spaces,
In the South.
much more vibrant, bustling. Naples is the classic example, scoring a 9 out of 10. Life really spills out onto the streets. You see that famous passacchiata, the evening stroll. In the South, you'll see entire families, grandparents, parents, little kids out strolling at 9:30, 10 at night. There's loud conversation, music, kids playing late. It's just a much more audible, visible, communal energy. So, if you really value peace and quiet, the North might feel more comfortable. If you thrive on that lively collective buzz, the South will likely feel more welcoming.
Okay, so pace, rules, noise, it all seems to follow this north-south gradient pretty clearly. What about something really core to Italian culture everywhere? Family and community. Does that vary too?
Family is absolutely central everywhere in Italy. Let's be clear on that.
But
The way it manifests in daily life, the balance between individualism and collectivism does show significant regional variation.
the North is relatively more individualistic, scoring around a 6 or 7 on our scale. It aligns more with patterns in other Western European countries. It's generally more common for young adults to move out and establish independence earlier. Privacy tends to be quite highly valued.
It's more Western in that sense.
Yeah, then you go south, including the islands like Sicily and Sardinia, and it becomes much more collectivist. Scores drop down to maybe 2 or 3 for individualism. Life is deeply, fundamentally interwoven with family and the immediate community, meaning major life decisions are often made collectively as a family. Adult children often live at home much longer, sometimes until marriage or even after. Neighbors are not just people who live next door, they're often deeply involved in your daily life. We saw a study comparing students, and those from the South reported feeling a much stronger sense of obligation towards family needs and responsibilities.
So for a newcomer, what does that feel like?
It can be incredibly welcoming. Moving south often means you get adopted by the community very quickly. People are warm, open, and want to include you, which is wonderful. But it might also mean less personal anonymity than you might be used to.
Right, you're part of the fabric much faster.
Up north, people are certainly friendly, but initial interactions might be a bit more reserved. Building those deep connections might take a bit more time.
Sounds like it would massively shape your social integration experience. What about language? Is it easier to get by with English in some places than others?
Generally, yes, the north, particularly in the wealthier regions like Lombardy, and also major tourist hubs in the center, like Florence or Rome, it is usually easier to navigate with limited Italian, at least initially.
More English speakers in shops, services.
Exactly. More international business, more tourism, infrastructure means more people have exposure to and use English. Down south, outside of the main tourist areas, English is often much less common. People are incredibly helpful and will go out of their way to understand you, but
But you'll need to learn Italian faster.
you'll likely find yourself needing and probably wanting to learn Italian much more quickly out of sheer necessity, which honestly can be a fantastic motivator and a great way to really connect with the local culture.
Necessity is the best teacher. Okay, last dimension, food. We know it's sacred everywhere, but formality. Are there subtle differences?
Absolutely. Food is revered nationwide, no question. High formality scores across the board, mostly in the 7 and 9 range. But yeah, there are regional nuances in how that reverence plays out. In big northern cities like Milan, which we scored around a 6 for formality, you might find a bit more flexibility, maybe more openness to international food trends, things like brunch becoming popular, perhaps slightly more accommodation for dietary needs or variations on classic dishes,
Okay, a bit more modern, maybe.
perhaps. Then you go to a small town in, say, Sicily, scoring a 9 on formality. And the culinary traditions can be incredibly specific and quite strictly adhered to. Meal times are often non negotiable, recipes passed down through generations are followed to the letter.
And suggesting changes might not go down.
Yeah, suggesting putting Parmesan on your seafood pasta, for example, could genuinely cause offense in some places. It is seen as disrespecting the tradition. Central Italy, regions like Tuscany or Umbria, often strike a nice balance, deeply traditional but also very accustomed to international visitors and perhaps a bit more adaptable.
So the takeaway is respect the food culture everywhere, but the specific rules might be stricter in the South.
That's a fair summary, but the universal truth is that sharing meals is a core social ritual everywhere. It's fascinating how these 7 dimensions really do paint such distinct regional portraits. It makes you think of that Sophia Loren quote, "I am not Italian, I am Neapolitan." It really hammers home how strong that regional identity is.
It really is. That sense of belonging to your specific region, campanilismo, is incredibly powerful. And hopefully, looking at these dimensions helps make that identity a bit more tangible beyond just the famous landmarks.
Yeah, definitely. So, to make this even clearer, maybe we could spotlight a few specific regions, show how these patterns play out in real places and who they might suit.
Great idea. Let's pick a few that showcase the diversity. How about we start up north with Lombardy, kind of the economic powerhouse?
Okay, Lombardy. What does the framework tell us?
Lombardy really exemplifies that northern pattern we talked about. It scores highest on punctuality and trust, an 8. The daily rhythm is earlier, faster. Rule adherence is high, a 7. Noise levels are lower, around a 6. And it's relatively more individualistic, also a 7.
So, efficient, structured.
Very much so. It's also the most international region in many ways. You'll find widespread English, lots of modern amenities, very strong infrastructure. So think about who that suits. If you're a remote worker who absolutely needs reliable, fast internet and predictable services,
Lombardy could be a good bet.
for many people coming from, say, Northern Europe or North America, Lombardy might offer the easiest cultural transition.
What about somewhere that bridges the gap, a taste of both North and South?
Then we have to look at Rome and Lazio. Culturally, geographically, and in our data, it really sits in the middle. It's where North meets South.
How do the scores reflect that?
Pretty clearly. It's got moderate scores for institutional trust and efficiency, maybe 5s or 6s. The daily rhythm is balanced, not super early, not super late. There's a real mix of individualism and strong community feeling. You get the benefits of a capital city, but also that slightly chaotic, spontaneous Roman charm. Where
So, a bit of everything.
a bit of everything, order and chaos living side by side. You definitely need patience for the bureaucracy, no doubt about it. But if you're looking for that balance, maybe for a family wanting access to incredible history and culture, or a retiree who wants vibrancy but not overwhelming rigidity, Rome offers a fantastic mix. Plus, English is widely spoken in the city center. Amenities are abundant. It's a kind of balanced immersion.
The Great Compromise.
Okay?
Any other northern spots that stand out as unique?
Oh, absolutely. Venice in the Veneto region. Now, Veneto is generally northern in its profile, high trust, high rule adherence, scoring a 7 on both, efficient public services.
Venice itself must be different.
Exactly. The unique environment, life revolving around canals, not roads, dictates a completely different pace. Getting around, daily logistics, it's just unlike anywhere else. It forces a slower, more deliberate rhythm in some ways, despite the northern efficiency underneath.
So, who is Venice for?
It's really for someone captivated by its unique beauty, history, and art. Maybe a retiree prioritizing culture above all else, or someone drawn to that completely unique, non car based lifestyle. You have to be prepared for the crowds, of course, but it shows that even within the North, There's incredible variety.
A world of its own. Okay, let's round this out with an island example, somewhere known for strong traditions. Maybe Sardinia. Sardinia is fascinating. We called it the independent traditionalist. It's culturally very southern in its core aspects, rating very collectivist, low individualism score, maybe a 3. Family and community ties are incredibly deep. One interesting point is that its rule adherence score, while still lower than the North, is maybe slightly higher than some mainland southern regions, around 5. Perhaps its isolation fostered a slightly different dynamic there, but the overwhelming feel is one of deep tradition, incredibly strong community bonds, and life lived close to nature.
You would thrive there.
It seems like paradise for retirees looking for that slower Mediterranean pace, stunning natural beauty, and really wanting to become part of a warm, tight-knit local community.
But it requires commitment.
Absolutely. Sardinia requires a real embrace of the local way of life. Learning some Italian is pretty essential, maybe even picking up a few words of Sardinian. It's not a place you can just dip your toe into superficially.
These examples really bring the data to life, showing how it translates into a lived experience. So let's make this really personal for people listening. If someone's dreaming of Italy, how can they use this kind of thinking to figure out where they might fit best?
This whole framework isn't about saying region X is better than region Y. It's about self-awareness.
So using those 7 dimensions almost like a checklist against yourself.
Think of them as prompts for reflection. Ask yourself some honest questions.
Like what? Walk me through it.
Start with daily rhythm. Ask yourself, what's my natural energy level throughout the day? Am I an early bird who loves to get things done?
What's next?
Think about community feel. This touches on noise, street life, and individualism versus family. What do you truly crave socially? Do you value your privacy and personal space above all? Or do you thrive on constant interaction, knowing your neighbors, being part of a bustling piazza life? Or maybe you want a balance, friendly, but not intrusive.
All right, quiet village, lively city, or something else.
Then consider rules and getting things done. How do you prefer to operate? Does ambiguity or needing to figure things out stress you out? Do you feel most comfortable when there are clear procedures to follow? Or are you okay with a bit of flexibility? This points towards north versus south on rule adherence and trust.
How comfortable you are with l'arte di arrangearsi.
Then language. Be realistic. How prepared are you really to learn Italian? Do you need the safety net of being able to use English frequently, especially at the beginning? Or are you genuinely excited by the idea of full immersion, even if it's challenging? And finally, food traditions. Are you someone who loves trying everything but also likes flexibility and options? Or do you dream of living somewhere where ancient food rituals are fiercely protected and followed daily?
Okay, so thinking through those 5 areas rhythm, community, rules, language, food should give you a much clearer picture of your own ideal Italy.
It really should, because once you know what you prioritize in daily life, you can start to see the correlation.
Generally speaking,
Generally speaking, if your answers lean towards structure, efficiency, predictability, personal space, and maybe needing that English support initially, then the North might feel like a very natural fit. Regions like Lombardy, Piedmont, Veneto often align with those preferences.
so if you find yourself wanting a balance, appreciating tradition but also modern conveniences, enjoying both structure and spontaneity, think Tuscany, Umbria, Lazio with Rome, it often offers that middle ground.
The blend.
And if your heart truly sings for deep community connection, a slower, later rhythm, warmth, vibrant street life, and you're ready and eager to embrace local traditions wholeheartedly, even if it means navigating some bureaucratic quirks, then the South or the islands like Sicily or Sardinia might just capture your soul.
It really drives home that there's beauty and magic in every single region. The best place is entirely personal.
Understanding this amazing regional diversity helps you move beyond the generic dream and find the specific corner of Italy where your personal rhythm clicks with the local culture.
Finding your piece of the mosaic.
That's exactly it. And, exploring this kind of detailed regional compatibility is really core to the work done by Magic Towns Italy.
Well, thank you. This has been incredibly insightful, really getting under the skin of Italy's regional differences.
My pleasure entirely. It's a subject you could talk about forever, really. So much richness there.
It certainly feels that way. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
That's it for this week on Magic Towns Italy. You can create a free account at magictowns.it and explore over 2,000 towns, including those offering the 7% tax scheme, as well as download dozens of expat guides. We have over 200 data points per town, more than Italy's Statistics Authority itself, covering everything from property prices to schools, healthcare, crime, and more. If you want full access to filters and unlimited searches, upgrade to Magic Towns Premium. Use the code podcast for 20% off an annual plan. Thanks for listening. Our next podcast will be live on Saturday at 9 a.m.